For 40 years, she walked the same hallways. Every single day, morning and night, pushing the same cart with the squeaky wheel that no one ever bothered to fix. Her name was Mei Lin, and to everyone at Riverside High School in a small town in Ohio, she was just the cleaning lady. Nothing more, nothing less. She was 68 years old now. Her hair had turned gray a long time ago, and she kept it tied back in a simple bun. Her hands were rough from decades of work, mopping floors, scrubbing toilets, wiping down desks covered in gum and marker stains, emptying trash cans filled with half-eaten lunches and crumpled papers. This was her life. This had been her life for as long as most people at that school could remember. The teachers would walk past her in the morning and give a quick nod. Sometimes not even that. The students barely noticed her at all. She was like the walls or the water fountains. Just part of the building, always there, but never really seen. Mei Lin never complained. She showed up early. She stayed late. She did her job without making any trouble. When something spilled in the cafeteria, she cleaned it up. When a toilet overflowed in the boys' bathroom, she fixed it. When the gymnasium floor needed to shine before a big basketball game, she made it shine. She did all of this quietly, without asking for thanks, without expecting anything in return. Most people at the school did not even know her full name. They called her the cleaning lady, or sometimes just her, as in, go tell her there's a mess in room 204. A few of the older teachers knew her first name, but they rarely used it. She was invisible in the way that people who do hard work often become invisible. The world needs them, depends on them, but somehow forgets to see them. Mei Lin lived alone in a small apartment about 15 minutes from the school. It was a simple place. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with an old sofa, and a television she hardly ever watched. On the wall, there was a single photograph in a wooden frame. It showed a young woman sitting at a piano, her fingers resting on the keys, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. That young woman was Mei Lin, but that was a lifetime ago. A different world, a different person. She never talked about her past, not to anyone. When people asked where she was from, she would simply say far away and change the subject. When they asked if she had family, she would shake her head slowly and look down at her hands. After a while, people stopped asking. They assumed there was nothing interesting to know. She was just a quiet old woman who cleaned the school. What story could she possibly have? But everyone has a story. Even the people we walk past every day without a second glance. Even the ones who fade into the background. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the heaviest things inside them. Every evening, after the last teacher went home and the last student left the building, Mei Lin would finish her rounds. She would check every room, make sure every light was off, every door was locked, and then, when the school was completely empty and silent, she would do something that no one knew about. She would walk to the auditorium. The auditorium at Riverside High was a big space with red velvet seats and a wooden stage. It was used for school plays, concerts, and graduation ceremonies. On the stage, pushed to the side and covered with a cloth, sat a grand piano. It was old but still beautiful, black and shiny, with ivory keys that had yellowed just a little with age. Mei Lin would walk up those 3 small steps to the stage. She would pull back the cloth. She would sit down on the bench. And she would play. Not for anyone, just for herself. Just for the empty room and the ghosts of her memories. Her fingers would move across the keys like water flowing over stones. The music would fill the darkness. Sometimes it was soft and sad. Sometimes it was fast and powerful. She played pieces that most people would not recognize. Classical compositions that took years to master. Music that came from deep inside her, from a place she had locked away a long time ago. No one ever heard her. No one ever knew. By the time the sun came up, she was back to being the cleaning lady. Back to her cart, back to her mop, back to being invisible. 40 years is a long time to be invisible. 40 years is a long time to carry a secret. One autumn morning, the principal made an announcement over the loudspeaker. He said that Mei Lin would be retiring at the end of the month. After 4 decades of service, she was finally leaving. He said there would be a small party to thank her for her years of hard work. In the teacher's lounge, people reacted the way you might expect. A few said, "Oh, that's nice." A couple of them admitted they did not know she had been there that long. One younger teacher asked, "Wait, who is Mei-Lin?" And someone had to explain that she was the cleaning lady with the gray hair and the cart with the squeaky wheel. The party was organized quickly and without much thought. Someone ordered a cake from the grocery store. Someone else hung a few balloons in the auditorium. A small banner was made that said, "Happy Retirement," in blue letters. It was the kind of party you throw when you feel like you should do something but you do not really know the person you are celebrating. And that was the truth. None of them really knew her. They did not know that she once had a different life. They did not know about the photograph on her wall. They did not know about the late nights in the empty auditorium, when music filled the darkness and an old woman remembered who she used to be. They did not know that Mei-Lin was not always a cleaning lady. Once, a very long time ago, she was something else entirely. Something extraordinary. But life has a way of taking things from us. Dreams get lost. Paths get blocked. People end up in places they never planned to be. And sometimes, they stay in those places so long that they forget they were ever anywhere else. Mei-Lin had forgotten, or at least, she had tried to forget. But some things cannot stay buried forever. Some things wait in the silence, patient and quiet, until the right moment comes. And when that moment arrives, everything changes. The day of her retirement party was supposed to be ordinary. A cake, a few polite words, maybe a gift card. Then everyone would go home and forget about the quiet old woman who had cleaned their school for 40 years. But that is not what happened. What happened that day would change everything. Not just for Mei-Lin, but for everyone who was there to witness it. Because sometimes, the most invisible people are carrying the most incredible stories. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment for the whole world to finally see them. The retirement party was scheduled for 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. That was the time when most teachers were tired, most students had already left, and most people just wanted to go home and start their weekend. It was not the kind of time you pick when you really want to celebrate someone. It was the kind of time you pick when you are checking a box. The auditorium looked the same as it always did, except for a few decorations that someone had put up that morning. There were some blue and silver balloons tied to the end of the front row seats. A long table had been set up near the stage, with a white plastic tablecloth. On the table sat a rectangular cake from the grocery store. It had white frosting and blue flowers, and in the center it said, "Happy Retirement Mei-Lin," in cursive letters. Next to the cake was a bowl of fruit punch, a stack of paper plates, and a pile of plastic forks still in their wrapper. It was not fancy. It was not special. It was just enough to say that something had been done. By 3:15, about 20 people had gathered in the auditorium. A few teachers, a couple of office staff, the principal, the vice principal, a handful of students who had been asked to help serve the cake. They stood in small groups, talking to each other about their weekend plans, about the football game on Sunday, about anything except the woman the party was supposed to be for. Mei-Lin stood near the back, close to the door, as if she was ready to leave at any moment. She wore a simple gray sweater and black pants, the same kind of clothes she always wore. Her hands were folded in front of her, and she kept her eyes down. She looked uncomfortable, out of place, like she did not belong at her own party. And in a way, she did not. A few people walked over to say hello. They shook her hand and said things like, "Congratulations, and you must be excited. And what are you going to do with all your free time?" Mei-Lin smiled politely and nodded, but she did not say much. What could she say? These people did not know her. They had never known her. And now, after 40 years, they were pretending like they did. The principal walked to the front of the room and cleared his throat. He was a tall man with gray hair and glasses. He had been at the school for about 12 years, which meant he had worked with Mei-Lin for over a decade. But if you asked him to name 3 things about her, he probably could not do it. He tapped the microphone to make sure it was working, and the sound echoed through the auditorium. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said. "Thank you all for being here. We are gathered today to honor someone who has been a part of this school for a very long time. 40 years, in fact. That is longer than most of us have been working anywhere." A few people laughed politely. "Mei Lin has been a dedicated member of our custodial staff," the principal continued. "She has always been reliable, hardworking, and dependable." He paused for a moment, like he was trying to think of something else to say, something more personal. But nothing came. "So, let us all give her a round of applause and wish her well in her retirement." The room clapped. It was the kind of applause you hear at the end of a meeting. Polite but empty. A few people clapped a little harder, trying to make up for the lack of energy in the room, but it did not help much. Mei Lin gave a small bow and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Her face showed no emotion. If she was hurt by how little they knew about her, she did not let it show. She had spent 40 years being invisible. She was used to it by now. After the speech, people lined up for cake. The conversation quickly went back to normal. Weekend plans, grocery lists, complaints about traffic. Mei Lin stood off to the side, holding a small gift bag that someone had handed her. Inside was a gift card to a local restaurant, and a card signed by about a dozen people. Some of the signatures she did not even recognize. She thought about leaving. No one would notice. No one would care. She could just walk out the door, go home, and pretend this whole thing never happened. That would be easier. That would be safer. But something kept her there. Maybe it was the auditorium itself. This room where she had spent so many quiet nights alone. This room that held her secret. She looked toward the stage, toward the corner where the grand piano sat under its cloth cover. Her heart beat a little faster. No one knew. No one had ever known. A young teacher walked over to her. He was new at the school, maybe in his late 20s. He had a friendly face and a slice of cake on a paper plate. "Hey," he said. "I just wanted to say, 40 years is amazing. That is real dedication." Mei Lin looked at him and smiled. "Thank you. So, what are you going to do now?" he asked. "Any big plans?" "Oh." She shook her head. "No plans. Just rest, I think." The young teacher nodded. Then he looked around the room, as if searching for something else to say. His eyes landed on the stage. "You know," he said, "I always thought it was kind of funny that we have this beautiful piano, and hardly anyone ever plays it. It just sits there collecting dust." Mei Lin said nothing. Her eyes stayed on the piano. "Do you play?" the teacher asked, half joking. For a moment, she did not answer. The question hung in the air like a held breath. Then she shook her head slowly and said, "A little. A long time ago." The teacher smiled. "You should play something. Give us a little retirement concert." He was joking. She knew he was joking. But something inside her shifted. A door that had been closed for 40 years cracked open just a little. Before she could respond, another teacher nearby overheard the conversation. He was older, closer to retirement himself. He laughed and said, "Yeah, come on, Mei Lin. Play us out. Give us something to remember you by." A few other people turned to look. Someone else laughed. "Yeah, why not?" They were teasing her. She knew that. They did not expect her to actually do it. To them, she was just the cleaning lady. What could she possibly know about music? Mei Lin looked at the faces around her. The polite smiles, the curious eyes, the low expectations. 40 years of being invisible, 40 years of being no one. And then she made a decision. She set down the gift bag. She set down the paper plate with the untouched slice of cake. And without saying a word, she started walking toward the stage. The room got a little quieter. A few people exchanged confused looks. Was she serious? Was this some kind of joke? Mei Lin climbed the 3 small steps to the stage. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She walked over to the piano and pulled back the cloth cover. The black surface gleamed under the lights. The ivory keys waited. She sat down on the bench. She placed her hands on the keys. And in that moment, every person in that room stopped what they were doing. No one was laughing anymore. No one was checking their phone. No one was thinking about their weekend plans. They were all watching the quiet old cleaning lady with the gray hair and the rough hands, sitting at a piano she had no business playing. And then she began. The first note came soft, almost like a whisper. It floated through the auditorium and disappeared into the silence. A few people tilted their heads. They were waiting to see what would happen. Most of them expected something simple. Maybe a clumsy melody. Maybe a few broken chords. Something you might hear from a beginner. Something that would make everyone smile politely and clap out of kindness. But then came the second note, and the third, and the fourth, and suddenly, the room changed. The music that poured from that old piano was nothing like what anyone expected. It was not simple. It was not clumsy. It was not the sound of someone who had learned a little bit a long time ago. It was the sound of someone who had spent a lifetime inside that instrument. Someone who understood music the way most people understand breathing. Maylin's fingers moved across the keys like they had been waiting for this moment for 40 years. And maybe they had. Her eyes were closed. Her body swayed gently with the rhythm. She was no longer the quiet cleaning lady in the gray sweater. She was something else entirely. Something powerful. Something beautiful. The piece she played was classical. A composition that most of the people in that room had never heard before. It started slow and sad, like rain falling on an empty street. The notes climbed and fell, each one carrying a weight that pressed against the chest. It was the kind of music that made you feel something even if you did not understand it. The kind of music that reached inside you and touched things you had forgotten were there. The principal stood frozen near the punch bowl. His coffee cup was halfway to his lips, but he had stopped moving. His mouth hung open just slightly. He could not believe what he was hearing. This was not possible. This woman had cleaned his school for over a decade. He had walked past her 1,000 times, and he had never known. He had never even suspected. Near the back of the room, a young teacher leaned forward in her seat. Her eyes were wide. She had studied music in college. She had taken piano lessons for 8 years. And she knew, within the first 30 seconds, that what she was witnessing was something rare. This was not just good. This was mastery. This was the kind of playing you heard in concert halls, not school auditoriums. A student who had come to help serve cake stood near the door with a stack of napkins in her hand. She had been about to leave. But now she could not move. The music held her in place like an invisible hand. She did not know anything about classical music. She had never been to a symphony, but something about the sound made her chest feel tight, made her eyes sting. She did not understand why, but she felt like crying. The melody shifted. It grew faster, more urgent. The notes tumbled over each other like water rushing down a mountain. Maylin's hands flew across the keyboard, never missing a beat, never hesitating. Her fingers knew exactly where to go. They remembered everything. Every note, every pause, every breath. And then the music slowed again. It became gentle, tender, like a mother singing to a child. Like a goodbye that never got spoken. The sadness in those notes was so deep, so real, that a few people in the room had to look away. It was almost too much to hear. Too honest. Too raw. One of the older teachers, a woman who had worked at the school for almost 30 years, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She did not even realize she was crying until she felt the wetness on her cheeks. She looked around and saw that she was not alone. Others were crying too. Quietly. Without shame, the principal finally lowered his coffee cup. He set it down on the table and just stood there, staring at the stage. His mind was racing. Who was this woman? Where did she learn to play like this? How could someone with this much talent spend 40 years pushing a cleaning cart through hallways? The music built again. It rose and rose, climbing higher with every phrase. The notes became louder, more powerful. The whole auditorium seemed to vibrate with the sound. It was like a wave crashing against the shore, like a storm breaking through the clouds. like something that had been held inside for far too long, finally breaking free. Mei Lin's face was calm, peaceful. Even as her hands moved with incredible speed and precision, there was no strain in her expression. This was not effort for her. This was release. This was home. The young teacher who had joked about her playing sat completely still. His smile was gone. In its place was something like awe. He had never heard anything like this in person. He had never seen someone disappear so completely into their music. It was like watching someone transform right in front of his eyes. For 11 minutes, no one in that room moved. No one whispered. No one checked their phone. No one thought about the weekend, or the traffic, or the cake on the table. They just listened. They just watched. They let the music wash over them like a tide. And then, slowly, the melody began to fade. The notes grew softer, quieter, more distant, like a dream slipping away at the edge of morning. Mei Lin's fingers slowed. Her body stilled. The last note hung in the air for a long moment, trembling, fragile, like a single leaf falling from a tree. And then there was silence. Complete, total silence. No one knew what to do. No one knew what to say. For a few seconds that felt like hours, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of hearts. Mei Lin opened her eyes. She looked down at her hands resting on the keys. Then she looked out at the audience. At the faces staring back at her. At the tears on their cheeks. At the shock in their eyes. And then the applause started. It began with one person, the young teacher near the back. He stood up and started clapping. Then another person stood. Then another. Within seconds, everyone in that room was on their feet. The applause roared through the auditorium like thunder. It echoed off the walls and the ceiling. It filled every corner of the space. People were crying openly now. They were laughing and crying at the same time. They did not understand what they had just witnessed, but they knew it was something they would never forget. The principal walked toward the stage, still clapping. His eyes were red. His voice cracked when he tried to speak. He wanted to say something, to ask her how, to ask her why, but the words would not come. Mei Lin sat quietly on the bench. She did not stand up. She did not bow. She just looked at the crowd with a small, tired smile. The kind of smile you give when you have carried something heavy for a very long time and finally, set it down. After a few minutes, people started to come forward. They gathered near the stage. They wanted to talk to her. They wanted to understand. They wanted to know the story behind what they had just heard, because there had to be a story. Music like that does not come from nowhere. A gift like that does not stay hidden for 40 years, without a reason. Who was she really? Where did she come from? And why had she spent her whole life pretending to be invisible? The answers were coming. But they were harder to hear than the music. Because the truth about Mei Lin was not just surprising, it was heartbreaking. The crowd did not leave. Even after the applause faded, even after the tears were wiped away, people stayed. They gathered around the stage, around the piano, around the woman who had just shattered everything they thought they knew. They needed answers. They needed to understand. Mei Lin stayed seated on the piano bench for a long time. She looked tired. Not physically tired, but the kind of tired that comes from holding something inside for too many years. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not playing, just touching them, like she was saying goodbye to an old friend. The principal was the first to speak. His voice was soft, careful, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. Mei Lin, he said. I do not know what to say. That was incredible. I had no idea. None of us had any idea. She looked up at him and gave a small nod. It is okay, she said. No one was supposed to know. But why? Asked a teacher from the crowd. Why would you hide something like that? Mei Lin took a deep breath. She looked out at the faces watching her. These people who had walked past her for years without seeing her. These people who were now looking at her like she was a stranger, And maybe she was. Maybe she had been a stranger to them all along. It is a long story, she said quietly. We have time, someone replied. And so, for the first time in 40 years, Mei Lin told her story. She was born in China, in a small village outside of Shanghai. Her family was poor. Her father worked in a factory. Her mother sold vegetables at the market. They did not have much, but they had love, and they had music. Her grandmother had been a piano teacher before the war. She had an old, upright piano that she had somehow managed to keep through all the hard years. It was missing a few keys, and the sound was not perfect, but to a little girl, it was magic. Mei Lin started playing when she was 4 years old. Her grandmother would sit beside her and guide her tiny fingers across the keys. She learned quickly. Too quickly. By the time she was 6, she could play pieces that most adults could not master. By the time she was 8, her grandmother said she had nothing left to teach her. Word spread through the village about the little girl with the gift. People came from nearby towns just to hear her play. Someone told someone, who told someone else. And, eventually, the news reached the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. It was one of the most famous music schools in all of China. Only the most talented students were accepted. When Mei Lin was 10 years old, 2 men in suits came to her village. They listened to her play for less than 5 minutes. Then they offered her a full scholarship. Her parents cried. Her grandmother held her close and whispered, "This is your destiny. Do not waste it." She moved to Shanghai alone. She was just a child, living in a dormitory with other young musicians, practicing 8 hours a day. It was hard. She missed her family. She missed her village, but she loved the music, and the music loved her back. By the time she was 18, Mei Lin was considered one of the finest pianists in the country. She won competitions. She performed in concert halls. Important people came to hear her play. Teachers said she had a gift that came along once in a generation. Her future was bright. Everything was possible. And then everything fell apart. Mei Lin paused. Her hands trembled slightly on the keys. The people listening leaned closer, afraid to miss a single word. There was trouble in the country, she continued. Political trouble. The government did not like certain people. Artists. Intellectuals. People who thought differently. My family was accused of things that were not true. They said my father was disloyal. They said my mother spread dangerous ideas. It was all lies, but it did not matter. The truth did not matter. Her voice grew quieter. They came for us in the night. Soldiers. They took my father away. We never saw him again. My mother, my grandmother, and I had to run. We left everything behind. The house, the piano, our whole life. We walked for days through the mountains. We hid in forests and barns. We ate whatever we could find. My grandmother was old. The journey was too hard for her. She stopped. Her eyes were wet, but she did not cry. She had cried enough tears a lifetime ago. She died on the road. We buried her under a tree with white flowers. My mother and I kept going. We had no choice. The room was completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. We made it to Hong Kong. Then to America. We had nothing. No money. No papers. No family. My mother got sick on the ship. By the time we reached California, she could barely walk. She held on for 3 more months. And then she was gone too. Mei Lin looked down at her hands. I was 22 years old, alone in a country where I did not speak the language. I had no money, no home, no one. The only thing I knew how to do was play piano. But who would hire a young immigrant woman with no papers, no connections, no proof of who she used to be? I tried. I went to music schools. I knocked on doors. They all said no. Some of them laughed at me. They did not believe I could play. They did not believe I was who I said I was. She shook her head slowly. After a while, I stopped trying. I needed to survive. So I took whatever work I could find. Cleaning, washing dishes, scrubbing floors. It did not matter what it was. I just needed to eat. I just needed to live. But the music, someone asked softly. You never stopped playing. We heard you. That was not the sound of someone who gave up. Everyone. Mei Lin smiled sadly. No, I never stopped. But I played only for myself. Late at night, when no one was around. In empty rooms. In this auditorium, after everyone went home, the piano was the only thing I had left from my old life. The only connection to my grandmother, my mother, my father. To everything I lost. I could not let it go. But I could not share it either. It hurt too much. She looked at the crowd. Playing that music reminded me of everything that was taken from me. Every time I touched the keys, I saw my grandmother's face. I heard my mother's voice. I remembered the life I was supposed to have. The life that was stolen. So I kept it hidden. I kept it private. It was mine. The only thing that was still mine. 70 describes. Tears were streaming down faces in the audience. The principal wiped his eyes. The young teacher who had joked about her playing stared at the floor, unable to look up. For 40 years, Mei Lin said, I cleaned this school. I watched students come and go. I watched teachers build their careers. I watched life happen all around me, and I stayed invisible. Because invisible was safe. Invisible meant no one could take anything else from me. She placed her hands flat on the piano keys one last time. But today, I do not know what happened. Something inside me just broke open. When that young man asked me to play, I thought, why not? I am 68 years old. I am retiring. What is left to protect? What is left to lose? She looked at the crowd with clear, steady eyes. So I played, and now you know. Now you know who I really am. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Full of sorrow and understanding, and something that felt like love. And then, one by one, people began to step forward. One by one, people stepped forward. Not to ask more questions, not to demand more of her story, but to do something that should have happened a long time ago. They came to say they were sorry. The principal reached her first. He stood in front of the piano bench with tears in his eyes. He did not try to hide them. He took her hand in both of his and held it gently. I have worked beside you for 12 years, he said. 12 years. And I never once asked about your life. I never once tried to know you. I am so sorry. Mei Lin looked at him and nodded. There was no anger in her eyes. No bitterness. Just a quiet kind of peace. You did not know, she said softly. How could you? I did not let anyone know. But he shook his head. That is not an excuse. We should have tried. We should have seen you. Others followed. A teacher who had worked at the school for 20 years. She apologized for never learning to say Mei Lin's name correctly. A younger teacher admitted he had walked past her hundreds of times without ever saying hello. An office worker said she was ashamed that she did not even know Mei Lin had been at the school for 4 decades. One by one, they came. And one by one, Mei Lin accepted their words with grace. She did not blame them, she understood. She had spent 40 years making herself invisible. She could not be angry at people for not seeing what she had worked so hard to hide. But something had changed. In that room, in that moment, she was no longer invisible. She was seen. Truly seen. Maybe for the first time since she was a young woman on a stage in Shanghai, playing for crowds who believed in her future. What no one knew yet was that the moment had been captured. A student near the back of the auditorium had taken out her phone when Mei Lin started playing. She did not know why. Something just told her to record it. She held up her phone and filmed the whole performance. Every note. Every tear. Every second of the standing ovation. And when it was over, without really thinking about it, she posted the video online. By the next morning, it had 10,000 views. By the end of the week, it had 3 million. The video spread like wildfire. People shared it with their friends, their families, their co-workers. News stations picked it up. Websites wrote articles about it. The story of the 68-year-old cleaning lady who sat down at a piano and stunned, the world touched something deep in people everywhere. Comments poured in from around the globe. People wrote about how the video made them cry, how it reminded them of their own hidden dreams, how it made them think about the people in their lives they might be overlooking. The video was not just about Mei Lin, it was about everyone who had ever felt invisible, everyone who had ever carried a secret gift, everyone who had ever been told they were not good enough. Mei Lin did not own a computer. She did not have social media. She had no idea any of this was happening until a reporter showed up at her apartment door 3 days after the party. She was confused at first, then overwhelmed. Then, slowly, something like wonder crept into her eyes. People wanted to hear her play. People wanted to know her story. After 40 years of silence, the world was finally listening. The invitations started coming. A local news station asked for an interview. A radio program wanted to feature her. A documentary filmmaker reached out. And then, the letter that changed everything arrived. It came from the Cleveland Orchestra. They had seen the video. They had researched her background. They had confirmed that she was indeed the same young prodigy who had dazzled audiences in China 50 years ago. And they wanted to invite her to perform, not as a guest, not as a curiosity, as a soloist, on their main stage, in front of thousands of people. Mei Lin read the letter 3 times before she believed it was real. For weeks, she was not sure if she could do it. The idea terrified her. She had not performed for a real audience in nearly half a century. What if she failed? What if she froze? What if the world realized she was not as good as they thought? But then she remembered something her grandmother had told her a long time ago. Back when she was just a little girl with small hands and big dreams. The music does not belong to you, her grandmother had said. It passes through you. Your only job is to let it out. So she said yes. The night of the concert, the hall was completely full. Every seat was taken. People had come from all over the country to see her. Some of them had seen the video and wanted to witness the magic in person. Some of them were musicians who wanted to pay respect to a lost legend. Some of them were just ordinary people who had been moved by her story and wanted to be part of the moment. Mei Lin walked onto the stage wearing a simple black dress. Her gray hair was pulled back the way it always was. Her hands, still rough from years of hard work, hung loosely at her sides. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she was scared. For a moment, she wanted to turn around and run. But then she saw something in the crowd. In the front row, a group of familiar faces, teachers from the school, students, the principal, they had all come. They were holding small signs that said, "We see you," in hand-painted letters. Mei Lin smiled. A real smile. The kind she had not worn in a very long time. She walked to the piano. She sat down on the bench. She placed her hands on the keys. And she played. She played for her grandmother, who had given her the gift. She played for her mother, who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. She played for her father, who she never got to say goodbye to. She played for the little girl who once dreamed of concert halls and standing ovations. And she played for herself. For the woman who had spent 40 years in the shadows. For the woman who had finally stepped into the light. When the last note faded, the silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then, the crowd rose to their feet. The applause thundered through the hall like a storm. People were crying and cheering and holding each other. It was the kind of ovation that shakes the walls and fills the soul. Mei Lin stood slowly. She bowed. And then she did something she had never done before. She spoke. "Thank you," she said into the microphone, her voice soft but steady. "For 40 years, I was invisible. I thought that was safer. I thought that was easier. But I was wrong. We are not meant to hide. We are meant to be seen. We are meant to share what is inside us. No matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it feels." She paused and looked out at the crowd. The music never left me. I just needed someone to finally hear it. The applause erupted again. And this time, Mei Lin did not look away. She stood tall. She let them see her. All of her. And for the first time in 40 years, she was not invisible anymore.